All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Club Book. Tonight we are hosting New York Times bestseller James Rollins, who I'm so excited to have here tonight to talk about his latest Sigma Force novel. My name is Kaylin Creason. I'm a librarian with Washington County Libraries, and I'll be your moderator tonight. Before I introduce tonight's guest properly, allow me a moment to tell you a little bit more about the unique series that's bringing him here to us. Some of you are familiar with that, and we welcome you back, and some of you are new, and we're so happy to have you. Club Book is a program of MELSA, the Metropolitan Library Service Agency, made possible through Minnesota's Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, and coordinated by Library Strategies, part of the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. Washington County Library is the co-organizer of this evening's talk. Thank you also so much to our partner bookseller, Valley Bookseller. A purchase link to Kingdom of Bones will be available in the comments section of this live stream feed. So if you're interested in reading that and buying it, which I do hope you either buy it or get it from your local library, you can purchase it from Valley Bookseller with that link in the comments section, have it shipped or pick it up at their lovely store in Stillwater. Everyone needs a reason to go to Stillwater, right? One final housekeeping note, also in the comments, you'll see a survey link about tonight's event. Melsa would really appreciate it if you could give us your feedback. We'd love to know what you think of Club Book. We promise it's quick and easy. All right, now the good stuff. The reason you're here tonight, our featured event. Few authors today boast the cross-genre appeal of international following of novelist James Rollins. Hey, James, I got a little more to say about you, but feel free to turn that camera on. Over the past 3 decades, Rollins has published standalone thrillers, the popular Jake Ransom middle grade series, and the novelization of the 2008 Steven Spielberg Kingdom of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Rollins is equally adept at epic fantasy. Recent ventures include the Order of the Sanguines trilogy, co-authored with Rebecca Cantrell, and the Starless Crown, the first entry in his promising Moon Fall Saga. For many readers, however, Rollins is best known for the #1 New York Times bestselling Sigma Force series. Commissioned by the US government, this elite corps explores and safeguards all manner of anomalies with national security implications. The 16th installment, Kingdom of Bones, hit shelves on April 19th. In this story, deep in the Congo, an insidious phenomenon is leveling the evolutionary playing field by turning the lush biome cunning and predatory. As they race to prevent pending global catastrophe, the Sigmas, so often the hunters, find themselves in the unfamiliar role of prey. So we are now going to talk to James about his wonderful book. I'm going to ask some questions. I'm going to ask some audience questions we've gotten in advance. But we'll also have time for questions from everyone watching today. So please drop those questions in the comments thread here on Facebook, and our tech manager will send them to me. We would love to ask as many questions of James as possible and entertain him while he's here with us. So send your questions in. You can also send anonymously on a private message on Club Book on Facebook, or send an email to clubbookmn@gmail.com. And Lord above, if that ain't enough from me. James, hello.
Thank you very much, Kaylin.
Yeah, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic.
You're welcome. Good. We're so excited to talk about your book. It just came out.
Yeah, it's just been on a week now, so that's pretty exciting. Just got back from a week-long in-person tour, visiting bookstores for the first time, which is unusual. It's been a while since we've had in-person events. My last book tour was all via Zoom, as we're on today, or Facebook Live, or any of the other countless virtual methods or methodologies out there. But it's never as fun as being in person. Not that, I don't love seeing Caitlin's face right here, but still, it's just, you don't get that interaction of having audience members right there interacting with you. So it's nice seeing that we're slowly transitioning, from all virtual to starting to see the world open up. So that's a great deal of fun to be able to go back on the road again.
Oh, I bet it absolutely is. I mean, it's been a long time, and we're happy the world's opening up. Is it odd in any way to be given the content matter of the book, to be talking about viruses as we come out of this virus. How's that feel?
Yeah, that was a difficult situation in some regard, is that I got the idea for this book from an article I read in New Science magazine. Came out in early 2019. The title of the article was "When is the next global pandemic due to hit?" And a fairly prophetic article coming out in 2019. And but it wasn't so much the pandemic quality of that article that intrigued me, because I'd already done pandemic novels in the past. The Sixth Extinction, The Seventh Plague also had a pandemic quality to them. But what interested me in that article was they were shining a light on these virus hunters, brave men and women scientists that were going out into remote corners of the world, sampling the wildlife out there, searching for the next possible pandemic pathogen that could threaten the world. And I was really intrigued by that. I thought that's be fun to sort of have a pair of virus hunters in a book. But what's intriguing to me, my background is in veterinary medicine, and most of the wildlife, most of the virus hunters out there are wildlife veterinarians. So that further sort of stoked my desire to maybe feature a wildlife veterinarian who happens to be a virus hunter in a book. And so I began building the story in 2019. And middle of 2019, I had the skeletal outline worked out. I submitted it to my editor. She said, "Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Run with it." So I began working with it. I had a bevy of virologists and medical doctors and evolutionary biologists that were talking to me as I was building the story. And then, of course, about 3/4 of the way through the book, March 2020 arrives, and COVID appears and becomes a big problem. And my editor calls me and says, "Hey, Jim, did any of those virologists that you were speaking to in 2019, did they warn you what was going to happen in 2020? No, they did not. I wish they had. But it was actually fascinating to have sort of a fly on the wall type of view into the virology labs, because I was still in contact with these virologists before the pandemic and in the early months of the pandemic. And it was interesting seeing how their timbre changed from very casual about their job to being very serious to being panicked about their job. And I was hearing things from these professors and doctors in the field that were telling me things that I wasn't hearing out loud in the public sphere. I wasn't hearing it from public health officials, wasn't hearing it from government officials, but I was hearing it from the virologists. If you remember back in March 2020, they were originally saying, "Hey, don't worry about wearing masks in public. Save it for the doctors. You don't need to be concerned if you're in public. Don't carry a mask." Where in this ear, the virologists were screaming, "Jim, don't leave your house unless you're wearing a biosafety level 3 hazard suit. We're scared of this virus. This virus might be what we call disease X. It's sort of the proverbial boogeyman of the virology world. It's a pandemic pathogen that has 3 properties. It spreads rapidly, usually through the air, mutates rapidly, and has no known cure." So early in COVID met all those 3 requirements early in the process. So they were panicked that COVID could be that disease X, the pathogen that was going to decimate the human population. So that's what I was hearing in this ear. And everybody else was like, in the public sphere, was like, "Calm down, calm down, calm down." And so again, March 2020, 3/4 of the way through the novel, I'm wondering whether I should even finish this novel, because I know what we're heading into at this point. And I'm thinking, well, my books are meant to be popcorn entertainment. They're big roller coaster rides of an adventure. Do I really want to release that type of book dealing with virology during a pandemic when medical doctors and nurses are at the front lines? You have family members dealing with death and loss and sickness. Do I really want to release a book like that? So I thought about it for a while, and I realized, well, what I'm hearing from the virologist was very different from what I was hearing in the public sphere. I thought, what they're telling me, I think is really important that people need to know about. And, I can give this information during the course of this roller coaster of an adventure to shine a bit of a light on the current pandemic, but also give some insight about what might come next. Because it's not a matter of, if there's going to be another global pandemic, it's going to be a matter of when there's going to be the next global pandemic. So some of the stuff I learned was reassuring. Some of the stuff I learned from them was terrifying. And so I decided I'm going to finish this novel and share both sides of that, what I've learned from the virologists out there in this book.
What a fascinating place to be as a writer during all of that. to just
Fascinating,
be
terrifying. It is a little
terrifying.
unnerving
Yeah.
to hear, what they were telling me to do versus what the public sphere was telling me to do. Was a bit unnerving to be writing about the weird biology of viruses while we're seeing this rapidly mutating strain of the coronavirus spreading around the globe.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think some people tried to find some place where they could pretend it wasn't happening, but when you're writing about it, I'm not sure you can do that, But
Oh,
you did find time
living in that
because
world.
what'd you say?
You're definitely living in that world. When you're writing a book, you live in that world, you're breathing that world. So it was not the best place to be necessarily while a global pandemic is raging.
Right. Oh gosh. Although you did find time to write about some other things too. I know you just had a fantasy novel come out as well.
Did one of the, I guess, slight advantage in having my books delayed periodically throughout this. Kingdom of Bone was supposed to come out last summer,
Okay.
but because my last Sigma book came out in March 2020, just before all the bookstores closed down, they didn't want to release another Sigma novel during an active pandemic phase. So they picked last summer, figuring, well, we'll be past COVID by then. But of course, what happened, if you remember at the beginning of summer, they were saying, hey, don't worry about, you can start taking your masks off. But then about 2 weeks later, said, nope, put your mask back on, because a variant arose. And then so they said, well, let's skip summer. Let's push you over to December. By December, we'll be past all of this. Then, of course, we all got a Christmas present of Omicron come December. So they said, hey, you know what? Let's move you to April. Because surely by April, you'll have this, we'll be past this. So I became convinced that possibly the coronavirus was aware of my pub dates and was mutating just to block me every time a book was coming out. But I think at this point, it's letting me look. But I had a gap of time because of that to work on another project. And I've got, if I slide this over, you can see right over here, I've got these metal file cabinets right here. This is what it used to be those old cardboard lawyers file boxes, but I made it more official now. It's what I call my idea box. It's where I throw all my ideas for ideas. If I find some across a historical mystery that intrigues me, I'll cut out that article or write some notes about it, throw it in there. Science that makes me go, what if, where's that headed, goes in there. So a long time ago, about 7 years ago, I had this idea I read an article about tidally locked planets. It was an astrophysicist astronomy magazine, rather. And what a tidally locked planet is a planet that circles its sun with one side always facing the sun, one side eternally in darkness. It's what our moon does. Our moon is a tidally locked satellite circling our planet. One side of the moon always faces us, one side doesn't. Well, there are actually planets that circle their suns in the same manner. And I was really intrigued by that. And I was wondering, can life exist in such a strange, weird biosphere? And so I talked to some astrophysicists and astrobiologists that can such a planet sustain life? And they were, well, that's a good question. It's, theoretically, yes, because of the thermodynamics of that planet, the extremes on either side. There's probably going to be a shift of winds that are going to carry some of the heat to one side, some of the cold to the other. And probably between those two extremes, there probably is a habitable sort of twilight zone between those two, where life could exist. And so then I thought, well, that'd be really sort of a fun planet to set a story in, and began building that world maps and creator, try to figure out what would evolve in such a planet during those extremes, and build this whole sort of fantasy world and landscape and characters and creatures. And the folder for that idea got fatter and fatter. I knew at some point I wanted to tell that story, but I didn't know when. It had been a while since I've written fantasy, so it was just something I was playing with more than actively serious. But because I had a bit of time to work on another project, I thought, well, I'm going to work on this fantasy. So that became the Starless Crown, the first book in a 4-book series that deals with a planet that is circling its sun, tidally locked, that runs the risk of the moon crashing into the planet. But anyways, that's Starless Crown.
That is so cool. It's so obvious how curious you are as a person, and it's fun to hear how you had this, with that book, you're talking about space and large planetary bodies, and then in this book, of course, it's viruses, which are so small. You have covered it all, I think. You're working your way there. It's cool.
I'm on my I'm writing my 40th book right now. So
Wow.
I'm always got that antenna up looking for those ideas that can go in those file folders over there to become the next story.
So you would say you're not anywhere close to running out of ideas then?
No, I'm secretly concerned someone will break into my house and steal those file folders over there, and my career's over because
Oh no.
it happened. Nobody would touch those. Those are
I don't
very
know. From
important.
what I'm hearing, you'd find some new articles soon enough. I have faith
Probably,
in you.
probably. But
Well,
there's
I'm
some
gonna get.
really cool ideas in there.
What'd you say?
There's some really cool ideas in those boxes already. I would hate to lose them. So
I bet.
maybe
Is there?
one thing.
Yeah. Is there, just to get a little insight? Feel free. You do not have to answer this question, but is there one in that box right now that maybe you don't know if you'll do something with, but it's kind of exciting to you at the moment?
Oh, definitely. I'm not gonna tell you what it is because if it ends
Totally.
up, I don't want to ruin anything.
Well,
Yeah, I can tell
yeah.
you
We don't have
I can tell you what the next Sigma book is that I'm currently working on right now.
to.
It's set in Australia. So we're going to another continent this time, from
Cool.
Africa to Australia. And it deals with, again, similar to this book dealing with the colonial history of Africa, this
Mm.
book deals with the colonial history of Australia a little bit, but also deals with Aboriginal mythology, some really cool stuff tied to Aboriginal mythology. And it's basically a big treasure hunt around the globe for an artifact that might or might not prove that we're not alone in the universe. So that's what's coming up next. But,
That is
oh,
very cool.
fun stuff to play with.
That sounds super fun. And speaking of fun, like you do go to a lot of, or your characters go to a lot of fun and exciting and dangerous and scary and cool places. And someone has a question for you about that, if you don't mind answering their question.
You do.
They just listed a few: Greenland, Mongolia, Angkor Wat, Paris. Have you visited any of these places for research or for pleasure? And which world destinations top your wish list at the moment?
Of the ones that were just listed, I've been to every one of them except for Greenland. I would love to go to Greenland, but I've never been to Greenland.
Oh,
The top of my bucket list, which has been on the top of my bucket list for a long time, because my very first book that I was ever got published was a book called Subterranean. And the elevator pitch for Subterranean was I was going to take 5 characters, drop them 2 miles underneath Antarctica, throw in some monsters, and then shake. That was my detailed pitch for Subterranean. But it took place entirely in Antarctica, but I've never set foot in Antarctica. I've been to 6 of the 7 continents, but not Antarctica. So that's my bucket list. If nothing else, is just to be able to put my foot on that continent, to say touched, got it, tagged, cross it off my list.
I love it. That's so cool. We're coming out of winter here in Minnesota, so I can't say that I have the same desire to go somewhere cold like that, but I'm all about this touching all the continents thing. That's very cool. Let's see. Another question from the same asker, and it's kind of got the same vibe. If you could they say time machine. If you could time machine back to any historic time and place, what and where would you choose?
Again, besides being a veterinarian, the other, career I thought would be really cool to have would be archaeologist. So a lot of my books are archaeology, so I'm very fascinated by ancient history. So it'd be a tough call. I mean, I like the whole era of Greek and Roman history. I'd love to go back during that period of time. But I'm also very interested, like in the Neanderthal period of time, where the Neanderthals were co-mixing with the early hominids. To me, I don't know how to survive that, but I'd like to be able to actually witness that. Would be really cool.
You don't know how to survive that? What? No. That would be really cool. Again, like you're clearly so curious, and that shows in your answers and in your books. I like that you're jumping from like Africa to now Australia. Like it's very cool. Let's see here. Oh, someone live. Thank you for the question. Has one more about info gathering and research that you do. They've heard, I don't know where they've heard, but they've heard that you have an info gathering and idea generation strategy that involves RSS feeds and email news on a wide variety of cool issues. Is that true? Does it help?
It does. I mean, I always have those antennas up, and I don't care where the information comes from. I get it off news feeds. I subscribe to 23 different magazines,
Wow.
not necessarily monthly, but they're either print or digital. And
Right.
but I also watch National Geographic channel. I watch Discovery Channel. I watch documentaries. I'll write notes if something pops up that intrigues me. But I also like to, even though I love to research, and it could be a trap for me. I can research and never actually write. So I made a commitment to myself that I can research for 90 days on a book, but the 91st day, I got to put words on paper. Otherwise, I will just keep researching and researching and researching, and nothing ever gets written. But I also am a bit of a lazy researcher, because I always sort of like people to tell me information rather than me necessarily have to hunt it down. Especially when it comes to scientists, I like to have scientists that I can have on speed dial, that I can talk to when I'm writing a certain topic, because science changes very rapidly, and what might be in a book, oftentimes the information in that book is years, if not even longer in age. Even a current article oftentimes is 3 or 4 months old. So I'd like to talk to these scientists so I can get the information right from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Is I'll ask these scientists, don't tell me what you're going to write in your next paper or the book you're working on. Look over your shoulder and tell me what's on your lab table right now, because I need that sense of immediacy, because it takes a long time for a book to get from idea to writing it to editing it. The lag time between publication could be a couple of years. And
Yeah.
because science changes so rapidly, I can't take any chance that the information I'm starting from is already a couple of years old, because it could change rapidly before the book comes out and it feels out of date. So for the science to feel topical and of the moment, and if not even somewhat prescient, I need that information from the scientists. And I've had books come out. I've used information from the scientists I put in the book, and the book comes out, people read it, and then 3 or 4 or 5 months later, there's an article that comes out that supports some of the wilder assertions in my book. And so it seems like it's prescient, like, oh, how did Jim know that this was going to be revealed? Well, that's because I was talking to that scientist that wrote that article. So I knew what he was going to write. And I just, I wrote him, beat him to the publication date.
Beat him to the punch, yeah.
It makes it look like I'm a little bit prophetic, but it's not. It's just that I've heard the information first.
Well, I think it does speak to you say you're a lazy researcher, but you're going straight to the source. You're really forming relationships and talking to people. And I think then that does speak to how it comes across in your books, where you've done the work and you've asked the questions. And I will say about this book, it did feel very current. I would say to anyone out there who's read it already, anyone who's thinking of reading it, it does feel like very of the moment. And this is not a spoiler, because this is the part of the plot of the book, is that what is this virus? They're trying to figure it out. And all of that felt very of the moment, and just very in line with, in a way that's almost scary, where your life feels similar to kind of a science fiction.
I was feeling that same way. And in fact, I had to keep tweaking this novel. Like I said, there was a lag time. And so since I had that book in my lap for a while, and I was getting information from the world at large as COVID was expanding, and I was learning new things, I'd go back and I would adjust things in my novel as the pandemic was unfolding, even though I thought the book was put to bed. But I kept tweaking it to make sure that when the book came out, that it was still, feeling topical and current, and not already out of date.
Yeah, it really does. And I obviously can't see the future, but I can see it feeling really resonating with people for a long time, just because of how close it is to what, obviously we haven't been in the jungle, most of us, trying to uncover the roots of a virus. But yeah, it really grips you. Another question someone's got, and it's a long question, so bear with me, but it does have some lovely praise in it that I want to make sure I read, and relates right now. They say, your stories are wonderful and always feel so plausible to me. I often have trouble summarizing your plots in a sentence for my book club. Sorry, I didn't read this before I started. I bet. It seems so crazy when you cram a Rollins premise into a brief conversation. That leads me to wonder, have you had any plots that are just so out there that you need to convince your publishing team on it? Or are they completely trusting of you at this point? Oh, that's fun. Good question.
That is a good question. I mean, and my books are hard to summarize into an elevator pitch of just a very short duration because there are so many things happening. There's a historical element, there's the modern adventure story, there's the scientific elements to the stories. So it's hard to boil it all down to a little bit. And that's probably why the Sigma books have been optioned by Hollywood multiple times. But it's also, I can't imagine them taking a Sigma novel and producing a 90-minute, 2-hour movie out of it. Because I don't know what, to me, everything seems essential to the book to make for everything to make sense. And so if you cut things out, how is that going to make sense? Luckily, there's a new company that came in, they bought all the Sigma books, every short story and every novel, and they want to do a streaming series based on this, which makes more sense to me, because to me, I think doing a book or two per season would make more sense than trying to pare down a book into such a narrow thing. But again, there's science, there's history, there's fantastical elements to the stories. There's this big adventure story. And so it's a little bit of everything. So when I grew up, I was reading a bunch of different genres. I didn't just like one genre. I would read science fiction, I read fantasy, I read horror, I read military thrillers, I read James Missionary. So when I started to write, I realized I was just sort of grabbing things from all these different genres to build my stories. And eventually, my publisher, HarperCollins, invites me to New York for the first time. And by this point, they had published about 7 or 8 of my novels. And I go to New York, climb to the top of HarperCollins Tower. And there's a big boardroom with this, super long boardroom table, and everybody from the publishing houses there, the marketing department, the Audible department, the sales department, the editorial department. At the end of the table is the head of HarperCollins. And he stares on, I'm at the other end of the table. He stares down a long table at me and goes, "Jim, we've had success publishing your novel. We just have one question. We're not still sure what you write, because well, you've published so many novels. I think you should know what I'm writing by now. But I do understand, I do blur the line between several genres, so it does make it sometimes hard to pigeonhole me into exactly what I write. So I do understand how that the one who asked that question was stymied by how to boil down a short pitch to a book club.
And that's so, the marketing team is like waiting with bated breath to hear how you'll answer so that they can
write what I like to write.
They seem to be selling, so they're good. That's really cool. Well, I'm excited that there's interest in it being, I'm glad that as far as a movie goes or a show, I'm glad a show is maybe in the works, because I think you're right, it would work much better as a serialized thing, because when you look at, and I'm going to get into some of these questions, but you described it as one point as like, a popcorn thriller, but there's a lot in these, like a lot of substance, like talking about colonialism, talking about virology, talking about, then you just get into the characters and all their personal dynamics, there's the history. So there's a lot that you really would have time to dig your teeth into in a series rather than a movie. So that's pretty exciting. I hope that happens.
When I was writing, I definitely thought my primary goal when I read a book is to entertain. Yeah. I want people, reading late into the night, not able to sleep. I want them like beads of sweat on their forehead. I want them involved in the story. I'm hoping when they turn the last page and they close the book, that I leave them with something to think about. That's why I have that, what's true, what's not section at the end of Kingdom. All the Sigma books have that, where I sort of pull aside the curtain and I reveal how much of the book was real, how much was imagination. If there are any topics that interest somebody, I'm going to leave some breadcrumbs that they can pick up and follow. Because for me, one of the best compliments I get as a writer is when a reader says something like, I really enjoyed your book, Jim, but I was really intrigued by this part of the history or this part of the science. I noted that book you mentioned, or that article, or that link you left, and I followed through and looked into that myself. Then to me, that means that the book worked on more levels than just that popcorn entertainment, that has some resonance. Then I think the book, that's to me one of the greatest compliments.
That is a great compliment. And we have someone giving that compliment right now. And another question that I have, which is that someone wrote, my book club was really interested in the story of African-American missionary William Henry Shepherd, who this person says I'd not heard of previously. So, hey, that's super cool.
Yeah, I mean,
And then,
I'll expand on just a little bit. Is that I was really fascinating when I was building the history for the story, and I came across Reverend William Shepherd. He was a Presbyterian minister who traveled to Africa during the height of King Leopold of Belgium's reign of the Congo, and it was a quite brutal reign. 10 million Congolese would die during a decade period of that reign. And it was mostly silent. A lot of people attribute The Heart of Darkness, Conrad's novel, for exposing the atrocities occurring in the Congo, but that wasn't true. Digging in deeper, I found out that who really sort of got attention to what was happening in the Congo was this Reverend William Shepherd. He, traveled to Africa, armed just with his faith and a Kodak box camera, pretty innovative in of itself. And so he took pictures of what was happening and reported back what was happening. And it was those, pictures are worth 1,000 words. And so it was his expose that really brought attention to the world what was happening under the canopy, the dark cover of the Congo. And that was what turned the tide towards turning world sentiment against what was happening and stopped the atrocities, or at least tamped it way down. So he was a hero of that era that really not many people are aware of. And fascinating figure. He was the first person to have contact with a tribe called the Kuba Tribe. They were basically disdainful. They wouldn't have any contact with outsiders, but they were very smart people. They were advanced in the metalwork. Their textiles were phenomenal. They had a very democratic sort of system of government, but he broke in by learning their language, simply by bothering to learn their language, to respect them enough to learn their language. They accepted him in, and he was the one that sort of brought the Kuba people to the world. And their art's fantastic. Picasso, his Cubist period is attributable to when he saw an exposition of Kuba artwork in Paris. So, none of that would have happened if it wasn't for Reverend William Shepherd.
That's amazing. Wow, that is very fascinating. Cool. So that you actually perfectly answered their follow-up question, or actually they want to know how you learned about him.
Again, I read avidly, and whatever the subject's going to be, I research it. I talk to historians, find out what their view on the situation is. Learned a lot of interesting things on like why was this the sudden interest in the Congo, and just a lot of information that came out. And so I stumbled across this name, and I kept inquiring people, and the historians are very well aware of him. It just really hasn't broken into sort of common knowledge. And so me being sort of that popcorn entertainment writer, I thought this is a perfect time to shine a light on this wonderful hero. Not only can I feature him as a hero in my book, he's a hero that deserves attention.
That is so cool. And that it brings me to the next question, which someone listening right now wrote. Hello, person listening. They wrote this, and I totally agree. They say, I highly recommend the author's note to readers, truth or fiction, at the end of the book. Seriously, me too. It's so fascinating. Everyone read the end notes if you read the book. And their question is, was this edition your idea or your team's idea, or a little bit of both?
No.
Yeah.
It was definitely my idea. Cool. And I did it for two reasons. First reason was, my goal when I write these books is to blur the line between fact and fiction. I want to blend facts and then my own imagination to take it somewhere a little bit crazy. And so I would have to field a lot of email questions, and I still answer all my own email. And so it would be like 1,000 people would ask me the same question over and over again. It was, is this part real or is that part real? Can you tell me where this information came? So rather than having to repeat that information ad nauseum via email, I'm just going to put it at the end of the book, so it saves me a lot of time afterwards. So there was a convenience factor. And the second reason was because of a 1-star Amazon review. Now, I've had 1-star Amazon reviews before, but this one particularly irked me in that it was like, it was like I was enjoying James Rollins' latest novel. I was really enjoying it until I got to this part of the book, and then it was so outlandish that it threw me out of the story. I just really couldn't accept that. This, he was jumping the shark. It was just, I couldn't. It was just too wild. I couldn't swallow it. And I'm reading that, and the issue that he had that he thought was too fantastical to be real was a fact. But I couldn't, of course, reach through the computer and shake him and say, it might sound outlandish, but you have to remember the adage, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. And in this case, that's what's happening here. So rather than having that happen again, I thought I'm going to do my, lay it out so that people understand how much actually, even though it sounds outlandish, it's really based on fact.
That is super cool. I love that. Yeah. Instead of shaking that person through the computer, you're like, well, I'm going to add this to all my books. No. We all benefit because it's great. I loved reading that at the end. To your point too, about wanting to keep people up at night reading and keep them thinking. I realized when you were saying that I was so desperate to finish the book that I was like, I'll take my lunch break later. I really want to finish this. So it works, people. It's a good one for sure. One of our listeners wants to know, do you have a favorite Sigma novel of your own at this point? And then they have a follow-up, but I'll start with that.
Sure. Again, that goes back to that old question, which kid do you love the best? Different books I like for different reasons. Sandstorm, where I sort of first stumbled upon Sigma Force as a group of characters. I wrote Sandstorm as a standalone, not thinking that it was going to be the launching pad for an entire series until I sort of liked Sigma, these former special forces soldiers that become scientists with guns. I liked that idea. And so carried it forward to the series. Map of Bones is where you sort of see the official sort of group that's carried through the series. So that's special. But certain books I enjoy writing. I enjoyed writing Kingdom of Bones a lot because, again, I don't want to ruin too much, but the elevator pitch for this is that there's a village. All hell breaks loose at a relief camp in the middle of the Congo. It's discovered that men, women, and children are found in this sort of dull, catatonic state. They can't speak really. They can't move that much, but the environment around them has been ramped up. It's more toxic. It's more predatory. It's more dangerous. And so I got to then, being a veterinarian with a background in evolutionary biology, I got to be able to play in the genetic toolbox and sort of create all these weird creatures. So that's a great deal of fun. So the Bones is one of probably at this point one of my favorites because I did get to have such a wild adventure with animals, and it features Tucker and Kane, who I enjoy writing. So it was a thoroughly enjoyable book to write.
Oh, it sounds like it, because you were a veterinarian for 15 years before you started writing. Is that right?
Yeah. That's a little overlap. I was writing as practicing. So I wrote short stories for a while and then tackled my first novel and sold. And I didn't immediately transition. Like I had my first sale and said, chuck in my veterinary career. I did it gradually. I owned my own clinic initially. So I sold my clinic, but I stayed employed with new owners. Went from full-time to part-time to weekends, and finally sort of stepped away. But I still do some volunteer work. I still work with a group of traps, feral cats, wild cats, and I go in one Sunday a month for about 8 hours spaying and neutering them. I just keep my toe in a little bit in that veterinary pool, just in case I ever have to fall back. I'm prepared with my scalpel to go back there. I can still neuter a cat in 30 seconds if I need to.
That's very, very cool. I didn't know that you still did that. That's awesome. Very neat. So the follow-up question this person had, and this might be the same as the favorite child thing, but is there a character you feel has autobiographical elements? Or maybe one you feel the most relationship with?
I think, no writer writes out of thin air. We're always drawing for elements of ourselves or elements of people we know. I also tell people, Gray is who I wish I could be. Kowalski is probably more like I actually am. Not as bright, Kowalski. He introduced Kowalski. I introduced Kowalski in Ice Hunt, one of my standalone novels, but I liked him so much. He was a comic relief of that novel, and so I thought I like him too much. I'm not going to leave him there. So I recruited him to Sigma many books later because I liked him so much. So anyway, that's a little bit of me is in everybody, even the villains.
Yeah, cool. All right, so let's see. We've talked about news and nonfiction. This is another question live from our audience. what fiction are you reading right now? And are there any authors you'd recommend right now to fans of your own work?
I'm reading another book that deals with virologists. It's a book that's coming out May 5th, I believe. I got an advanced copy of it. It's one of the cool things about being an author is they give you advanced copies. It's a book by an author named Chris Holm. It's called Child Zero. It deals, again, a bit of a pandemic novel, but sort of set into the future, set in 2027, where a pandemic virus, very unique virus. I don't want to give away what it is exactly, has sort of decimated the world and what the world looks like back at that time. So it's a scary novel, but very well written. What was the other question? I can't remember what other part. It's another part of the question.
That's okay. Just, are there any authors who, yeah.
Well, I mean, I still read a lot of the authors that I read, both before and the early stages of my career. I had a copy of Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton on my desk when I was writing Subterranean, that first book. Because again, like I said, that was my first book. I'd only been writing short stories. I wasn't quite sure how to figure out how to write a novel. Didn't know how to pace a novel. I read a lot of novels, but I wasn't quite sure how to write a novel. So I thought, well, rather than reinvent the wheel, I'm going to, use Jurassic Park as a template or an example. So I would count the number of pages until you see a dinosaur in Jurassic Park.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure about that page count is when I would introduce the monsters in my book. And, when does he kill off the first character in Jurassic Park? How many pages? Okay, right here. Well, I'll make sure that I kill off a character around that time period too. So I use that as a template. So Michael Crichton was a big influence. Yeah. I love the adventure fiction of Clive Cussler. I've been reading him since I was a kid. But again, I read James Michener. I love the travel log aspect of his stories. I read a lot of Tom Clancy and other type of military thrillers. I read a lot of fantasy, science fiction. So just I could turn my thing around. There's books across every genre up here. But probably one of the biggest influences of my writing career, though, was I became sort of in high school, which a lot of high school seems to be prone to do. I got fixated on a certain type of book, and it was the pulp novels from the 30s and 40s. Shadow, The Avengers, specifically Doc Savage. His pulp novels were reprinted as Bantam reprints in the 70s.
Cool.
And there's 181 of them. And I have all 181 of them sitting over there. And the premise of Doc Savage is that Doc Savage is a sort of a bigger than life hero who's surrounded by experts in their field, scientists or other experts in the field, and they protect against various global threats. Does that sound vaguely familiar to what I write? So the Doc Savage novels was a big influence to my writing.
Cool. It's cool though, because you yourself are someone surrounded by experts and bringing attention to some things that are good to bring attention to. So just saying, you and Sigma and Doc Savage might have some things in common.
Yep. Yeah. Now, even Doc Savage, one of Doc Savage's teammates is a character named Monk. And if you'll notice, there's a character named Monk amongst the Sigma Force members. So I actually lifted his name from Doc Savage and put him in my books.
Oh, that's so fun. That's a cool homage. All right. We've got, okay. I am slow on these questions. So sorry, everybody. They're coming in hot. Okay. Someone wrote, how long does it take for a prolific author like James to churn out a big Sigma F novel? Let's see. Yeah, they want to know how long it takes for you to write one.
I'm pretty structured. I mentioned before I do the 90 days of research.
Yeah.
Then it takes me about 6 months typically, because I'm very regimented. I write 5 double-spaced pages a day, every day. Well, 5 out of 7 days of the week. And that would generally get my novel done in 6 months. And then there's about a month or two of editing, and then I'm pretty much done. So it's about a year, maybe just shy of a year. But those 3 months of research overlaps when I'm finishing another book. So I typically do 2 books a year because there's an overlap of the 90 days of research overlap me finishing a prior book. So all said and done, it takes about a year, but there's a little overlap between the 2 books when I'm doing this research while I'm finishing up this book.
Very cool. Thank you. Let's see. Oh, someone wrote, this is just a comment and it's cute. They said, I started reading you after a recommendation from someone who knew I liked the old works of Edgar Rice Burroughs and H. Rider Haggard. You seem familiar with those names, so that's cool.
The old masters of the sci-fi generation. I've got a copy of Edgar Rice, a signed copy of one of Edgar Rice's Tarzan books, and that was actually the very first book I remember reading cover to cover as a kid.
Really?
Remember I had a little bookshelf, and I put Tarzan at the first, and then I would read other books, and I would put them, Black Beauty by Seward, and then the next book and the next book, and then I would measure not how many books I read, but how long. I would measure I've read 16 inches of books at this point. But I like Tarzan because it was written by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Because at the end of Tarzan of the Apes, there's a ape to English dictionary. So this fanciful, that you could theoretically learn to speak ape if you could, study this English. So just that little extra bit of authenticity, that verisimilitude, making it feel real, I thought was really impressed as a kid.
That is very cool. It also sounds like it was the origins of the veterinarian and the author. It's like all the
definitely.
things.
I know a lot of my early reading was animal type of books. I knew from third grade I wanted to be a veterinarian, so that was going to be my career track. Writing was just going to be a hobby, something I did on the side. My goal was maybe walk into a bookstore one day and see my book on a shelf, and I'm on my 40th book, so it's I have a shelf.
I was about to say, you've more or less achieved that, I guess. Like
exactly.
You've had some mild success,
A little bit.
Little publication called the New York Times has heard of you. Anyway, someone wants to know when we might see the next Moonfall novel.
The next Moonfall book 2 is called Cradle of Ice. I don't think that's been released to the public yet, but that is the second book. It comes out February of next year. Nice. February 23. Yep.
Awesome. All right. And then another question I have. So someone writes that they're an Indiana Jones fan like you are, and they loved your novelization of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. They also say they liked it so much more than the actual movie, but no offense to Steven Spielberg. They said, how did it come about that you were chosen to partner on a book for such an iconic franchise, which I now just learned you're a huge fan of too. So that must have been amazing.
I mentioned archaeologist was on my list of things. So of course, I loved indie from the get-go. I remember when they announced when the first movie was kind of coming out, I marked it on my calendar. I wanted to be there the first day. I didn't know what it was about. It's fairly cryptic, the advertising. You really didn't know what that movie was really about, but it was a Steven Spielberg movie. I was going to make sure I was there the first day. And so I circled it on my calendar. Well, unfortunately, they had a sneak preview the week before, and I had booked a whitewater rafting trip that weekend. But I was still intent to go to that sneak preview. So I remember paddling really fast to make sure I got out of that river in time to make it to the theater in time for the sneak preview. And I literally had to go from the river straight to the theater because I didn't have time to go home and change. So I was literally soaking wet watching Indiana Jones for the first time, which is a great way of watching Indiana Jones, by the way. I sort of feel sorry for whoever sat in the seat after I was sitting in that seat. I was sitting here before. I really like that movie. And,
right? Whoa, what am I in for?
So huge indie fan. Map of Bones, my first Sigma book, was reviewed by Publishers Weekly with this line. It's like a cross between Indiana Jones and Dan Brown and the Da Vinci Code. To this day, I don't know if they were insulting me by that comparison or whether they were complimenting me by that comparison, but I will take it as a compliment. So I was known sort of as an Indiana Jones-esque writer, especially my early standalones had a lot of archaeology in them. So when they were looking for somebody to novelize the movie, they approached me, and just out of the blue, I got this call, said, "Hey, would you want to do the novelization to the fourth Indiana Jones movie?" It's there was no hesitation. Yes. What are you going to pay me? Let's negotiate. Nope, just just send the contract. I'm ready to do it. It was a great deal of fun to do because they wanted the book to come out the same day the movie came out. And so I had a secret code to go onto a website where I can watch the dailies being shot of the movie. So I can make sure what I was seeing from the script, something that wasn't in the script is not detailed. I won't tell you what the costume exactly looks like. So I can see it on the dailies, what this person's wearing. So it was fun to sort of craft the story in that method. But also, all books are basically internal monologues. You're always experiencing the action through the mind of that character. You're experiencing their internal thoughts, which in the movie is all what's that you see on the screen. You never get the internal thoughts of the characters unless they do a voiceover at some point. So to me, it was a great deal of fun taking what was all very visually and then going into the inner world and building the inner world of Indy while writing the story. So that was a great deal of fun to do. And also, whenever they take a book and they turn it into a movie, they got to cut a lot of things out of the book to pare it down to become a movie. Well, when you're reverse engineering this, going from a script to a book, you get to add a lot of stuff. So I got to add like a dozen different scenes that were never in the movie. They're just purely out of my own imagination. So that was a great deal of fun. So almost like I was writing my own Indiana Jones, script in some regards, because adding all these scenes. So I got to flesh out things that I wondered about from watching the movie that was never really answered in the movie. I got to answer them in the book. So that was a great deal of fun.
What a dream experience.
It was. And that was, I will cherish that one forever.
That is pretty freaking cool, I have to say. Speaking of movies, someone did ask earlier, but now we're kind of back on that topic. Someone wants to know about the screen treatment for Sigma, and they write, or is it all hush hush? I'm going to go ahead and assume a lot of it's hush hush, but what can you tell us?
Very little. It is hush hush. I'll tell at this point. It'll be honest with you, we're at the early stages. They're working on the scripts right now, looking to attach talent. Whether it gets greenlit completely, don't know. I mean, I've been burned a lot. I've had 6 Subterranean. The first book I wrote was picked up as from NBC to be a miniseries, and it made it all the way through the script. They attached talent. They're just about to go into production, and all the heads of the NBC's creative force got canned, and a whole new slate was put in place. And so I got washed to the side, just that close to seeing it made, and it got washed away. So I'm optimistic, I'm hopeful, but I've got my loins girded against the possibility that might all go away again. So who knows?
Totally fair. I'm going to rephrase this person's question a little bit then, because they want to know your dream casting, but I don't want to insult any potential talent that might get attached. So I'll ask, are there any actors that in your head you do picture maybe as one of your characters or had prior,
I get that question asked a lot, is how would you cast your theoretical movie? Mm-hmm. And I don't like playing that game, and I'll tell you why.
Right.
When I was reading the Harry Potter books, Harry Potter, I knew exactly what he looked like in my head. And then I saw the movie. And now when I go back and reread any Harry Potter, I cannot help but think of Daniel Radcliffe as Harry Potter. And now that becomes, so it's erased that character, that dynamic character in my head. And I know what Gray and Monk and Kowalski look like. I mean, they are, down to a T to every little detail about them. I expect to turn around a corner and see them standing there. And I'm afraid if I say, hey, this actor is who I would like to play that character, I'm afraid I'm going to start thinking of that actor as that character. And start to fade away, and certain aspects of that character that actor are going to become parts of what I'm going to start infusing into the character when I really don't want that to be in the character. So I try to avoid playing that game. People will say, what do you think of this character? I'll say, yeah. I don't put a lot of weight on it, because I need to firmly keep those characters in my head.
I dig it. That's a solid answer, I think. All right, another question we have. We still have quite a few. All right, let me see. Actually, we made it through so many. Oh, this is a fun one. We were talking about this a little bit before we started the record, but do you have any say in the production of your audiobooks? Or more generally, can you tell us about what that production is like and what your involvement in it is like? They also add that they liked the narrator, Christian Bascus, who did Crucible and The Sixth Extinction.
He did also Kingdom of Bones. So I got a chance to watch him work, which was incredible. I mean, I didn't realize how I just thought the narrators, you picked up the book and they would just read it. They would just record it while they're reading it. But it's much more involved process, where they're repeating the lines over and over again, trying to get the right cadence, and they'll record a little bit and they'll go back and brush something else up, and then they'll go forward. It's sort of a constant going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards.
Wow.
It reads seamlessly when you listen to it, but it's such a dramatic process. And I'm really impressed. And I mentioned before that, I don't like to do readings at my book talks, because I always think that most authors that I've heard them read are the type of tendency to read in a monotone voice that slowly puts the audience to sleep. And I would probably do the same. I don't have a great reading voice. I think unless you can do funny voices, you shouldn't be reading your own material. So I'm really impressed with the talent. Do I have any say on who's picked? Yeah, they asked me, if any objection to somebody else, and I'll go listen to them. The narrator for Starless Crown, couldn't be a better narrator. I mean, just I listened to her work prior to her being selected, and she's just got the perfect voice that for the character, for that world. It's just I was just astounded.
That's very cool. It sounds like a cool process to be involved in. Yeah, that's really great. Let me see here. We have time for maybe one more question, I believe, before we wrap things up. I'm gonna see what I've got left. I would just say, I guess, you know what? I'm gonna be selfish and ask a question, because I've heard some fun stories from this. Do you have any library memories that are fun or worth sharing?
I just did a celebration library event that was a great deal of fun, because libraries always were an influence in two ways. Early in my career, I shouldn't say early in my career, early in my youth rather, we lived in Chicago and in Chatham, Ontario, and I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters. So, that's a family of 7 kids. So my mom would drag us to the library every Saturday, because she was an avid reader, and she didn't say you had to read, but she just sort of taught by example. And so I remember just crawling around the kids section of the library. I was addicted to these Danny Dunn scientific mysteries and to the Alfred Hitchcock 3 Investigator series. And so I would just, reading this book. It was that, I think that, I love sort of spinning stories and terrorizing my younger brothers and sisters with weird outlandish. If tears were involved, the better. And I call it storytelling. Mom called it lying. And reading was like pouring gasoline on that. So, reading at such a young age, I think influenced me to want to write. And then eventually my first book was published in 97. Wow. And that was almost just the early the internet was not really that active or that useful as a useful research tool. So I leaned on librarians at the Sacramento County Library. They knew exactly. I was writing a book about Antarctica. I already admitted, never been to Antarctica. Some of the subject matter I wasn't familiar with, so they were a great resource for directing me, answering questions. They were great. They knew I was working on this novel, and even though it was unpublished, they were very supportive, which gave me the encouragement to keep going. And so they were another influence. So they started my career and is wanting to write and wanting to read, and then eventually help me get my feet off the ground.
Oh, well, that's so cool. I love picturing you and your siblings and tears being good feedback, and all that is fun. So thanks for sharing all of that and how libraries have influenced you as well. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for tonight, but fortunately you were able to join us. This was absolutely amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a quick little outro here, but seriously, thank you for joining us. And everyone, please go put on hold or purchase Kingdom of Bones, especially now that one question asker, it's by that narrator you like. Go listen. Did you have anything else you wanted to say before I wrap it all up?
I just hope everybody enjoys the book. Hope they enjoy it on the popcorn level, and also, hopefully they'll learn a little bit more about what's going on currently with the pandemic.
I think they're in for a treat and some new things to get curious about, which is always fun. So this has been a virtual presentation of Club Book, a long-running literary series of MELSA made possible by the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Special thanks again to Washington County Library for their part in the evening. Before you log off, please look for that Club Book survey link. I think it's pretty close to that Valley Bookseller link, so check those two out in the comments. The survey will be projected in place of this video momentarily. Finally, consider joining Club Book on Tuesday, May 10th for a talk by Tia Williams. Williams is a tour de force in the style industry and has parlayed many of her firsthand experiences into best-selling novels. The latest, 7 Days in June, became an instant New York Times bestseller and the Reese Witherspoon Book Club pick for June 2021. This program will be co-hosted by Carver County Library. It'll be right here again on Facebook Live, and as always, it's free. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us.